Hey YouTubes! In today's video we are going to be assembling some Hormaguants. In order to do so, we are going to go over some of the tools necessary for prepping and then the stuff that we will need for assembly. This is going to be more of a comprehensive tool video because I'm going to go over some tools that we will not use to get these Hormaguants put together, but are used for more complex miniatures. So let's go ahead and head down to the table and get started. So when it comes to assembling miniatures, the tools you need are very much dependent on the miniature that you have in front of you. When it comes to something like Games Workshop, they have all of their minis are on sprues. So you clip these off, clean them up, and put them together. You don't really have to worry about much else unless maybe you clipped a piece off wrong or something along those lines and you have to repair it. But I mean, even with that being the Hormaguant sprue, then you have the despoiler here, and he's got a couple of smaller bits, more detail with a cape and stuff like that, but it's still minimal amount of tools needed to put it together. Now, there are definitely other miniature companies out there other than Games Workshop, and each of those companies has their own way of doing things. For Fantasy Flight Games, when it comes to like Star Wars Legion, their minis just come in little baggies with instructions on how to put them together. Then you have Privateer Press, where some models come in boxes, some models come in clamshells or blister packs, and those are they're all fine and dandy, but depending on what you have in front of you is going to change the tools that are necessary. What you see right now is pretty much all we need to be able to get a Games Workshop kit put together. However, other miniatures and other miniature companies, the way that things are done, prepping is going to be a little bit more extensive. Like for instance, I have this miniature from Atlantis Miniatures, it's one of their Minotaur minis that I got in this month's mini crate, or my model box actually, I'm sorry, my model box. So if you see here, when you put his head, there is a small gap in between his neck and his shoulder. Now we can fill that in with putty, so that's going to be something that we want to have readily available. So let's go over just the basic tools we see here in front of us, and then we'll bring in some other tools that I feel are necessary to have if you're going to be assembling miniatures from other companies. And so to start off, really, since we're working with sprues, you're going to want a good set of sprue clippers. Now, these ones I got on Amazon, the Xeron Corp. I really like these because they come to a good point, but they also, when you're clipping with them, there's no over, it's actually cutting the material. It's not squishing it as badly as other clippers do. I think that's probably one of the main things that you have to worry about, is that there's some clippers out there that when you go to clip it, it doesn't necessarily cut the material. It just kind of squishes it until there's not enough there to hold on to, and then it kind of breaks off, because then that just means more work when it comes to cleaning up like mold lines and stuff, which usually a good X-Acto knife will do the trick when it comes to mold lines. I get these off of Amazon too. These packs, they come 120. I don't really ever go through that many. Like I've had this for, I don't know, a year, and I just opened it for this video. So and then I prefer to have these little sticks here. These are sanding sticks, so it's got 320 on one side and 220 on the other for grit. So these are really nice when it comes to getting into some fine edges or cleaning up. Maybe I went a little too crazy with the X-Acto knife and I need to smooth out the piece that I just kind of, shaved off with the X-Acto knife. And then to bring it all together, you're going to need glue. Now, when it comes to glues, there's all kinds, so you've got thin glues, medium glues, all kinds of super glues and stuff like that. And it's really going to come down to personal preference. When it comes to kits that are on sprues, plastic cement is really good because it's a chemical bond, so it actually melts the plastic together. You can use just regular super glue, but you're not going to get that bond. And then if you're not working with a sprue, then of course you're going to have to go the super glue route, and that route can sometimes take you down other paths. Like for instance, if you're building a really nice pewter model, it can be really heavy, and so when it comes to that, you may need to branch out a little bit to be able to give it a little bit more strength. And when you do that, that comes down to pinning. And so you're going to use your hand vise and some, small bits to be able to add more structural support to a model, which I'll do a video on later on in this series to show what I mean there. So, but once you have the model complete, there are going to be times where you run into issues where, like I showed you on that Minotaur, where you have gaps, and that is where modeling putties come into play. Now, I have a few different ones. So mill putt, I use this, upside down. So, Hobby Lobby is kind of my favorite store when it comes to finding stuff like this. But mill putt is a 2-part. So this one's yellow and gray. So you mix the 2 parts together, and then it eventually hardens down. This one it can be affected with water. So if you want to, dilute it a little bit to make it easier to work with, you can. Then you have the traditional green stuff, which you mix blue and green together and you get green stuff. I don't use this a whole lot anymore, just because I'm more comfortable with other putties, for instance, epoxy sculpt. So epoxy sculpt is still another 2-part putty. When you just mix these together, part A, part B, or green stuff, and then that. All of these come together, and you can use those to fill in gaps in the models. And to do that, we usually use a sculpting tool, something along these lines here. So this is just a rubber-tipped, almost like a rubber-tipped paintbrush, and they come in various shapes and sizes. So like here's the a pointed one, then you've got these. So like this is a 1, this is a 0 when it comes to sizes. So they even have sizes like paintbrushes, and you can use these with a little bit of water, or I tend to use petroleum jelly, so just Vaseline. And you can use those tools to smooth out the putty and whatnot to make a seamless. If there's a gap in between the shoulder blades and stuff like that, or the head to the neck, like this Minotaur model that I showed you guys earlier, you use that tool to push the putty around, and then it once it dries, it looks like it's part of the model, and it makes the model a lot more seamless and get ready for a solid paint coat or solid paint job. All right, so those were some of the tools that I have on hand, depending on the kit that I plan on putting together. So I'll bust those out as I go, depending on how the kit actually goes together and what's needed. So we're going to use the tools that you see here in front of you to get these Hormaguants put together. So let's go ahead and get started at that, shall we? Okay, so Hormaguant sprue. So this is a really simple kit. So you're going to glue halves together, halves together, halves together, and that's going to make your full body of your Hormaguant, and then you can pick your arms. This is a ball and socket joint. So as long as you have a left arm going into a left socket, you can grab whichever and change it up a little bit. So first up, we are going to just get going here. Now I tend to get right on top to clip. I know some people out there will clip further back and then use a X-Acto knife to shave it down. I don't necessarily like doing that. I've never been good at, once I go to shave it down, I tend to take too much of the material off. So I kind of just try to get it all done in one go, so I get as close as possible to these clips. Still gonna need to be cleaned up a little bit, but not alright, so that's a good. We have the pieces for the body. I tend to work in zones like this when it comes to these kits, so I will put together the bodies like so, and then I'll put the heads together, glue the heads on, and then the arms, and then sometimes you can also look at doing stuff as sub-assemblies, excuse me, because maybe there's a gun that comes in over the chest, and so you wouldn't be able to paint the chest, so you're going to want to get the arms and guns and stuff glued together without actually gluing them into the ball and socket, so that way you can paint those separately. Now this one, you know, it fits together relatively simply. So you've got this little area here that goes together, but before we get to that point, we want to inspect these pieces, because in the way that these are injected molded, the kit is two pieces. So you know, they close together, and then the plastic is injected and then cured, and then they pull them apart. So when that happens, you can get some impurities, which you can kind of see on his spikes here, that are called mold lines, and then you can see the mold line right there. Now it's not necessary to get rid of these mold lines. It's part of the assembly process. However, your final miniature, when it's put together and painted, will definitely look a lot better if you're capable of getting rid of these mold lines. Specifically something like this mold line right here would definitely come through your paint job. So you could do this really nice paint job, and then everyone's just going to be staring at this random line going through this Hormaguant's leg. So that is where I like to grab my X-Acto knife, or these little sanding blocks. With the X-Acto knife, it's pretty simple. You want to use, I always use the back edge, not the sharp edge, and I just drag it along the mold line, and it, you know, slowly just kind of chip away at it, right? And then, you know, if you're not comfortable with that, you can always use a sanding block. So like right here, so that's the rest of the sprue where I cut it off at, and so I can just come in here with this and get that sanded down. And I don't think I'm going to be able to really show you that on camera, just because my camera wants to pick up some random stuff, but let's see. There we go. Yeah, just real quick. And, you know, as you go, fingernails help. I don't have any, but You can definitely use those to kind of get some of the material out of the details, just to make sure you're not messing up any of the details. And so, that was real quick, got that piece gone. And then, you go around each of the pieces, making sure that all of these mold lines are gone. And then once that is done, then you'd be ready for assembly. Once you have the models prepped, so as many mold lines as you feel like taking off, you've taken off. The next thing is to actually glue them together. Now this is a really simple model when it comes to these pieces here. So they just, kind of fits into that little pocket, right? And the gap that you see there is going to be normal, because you kind of want that there, because it's not part of that carapace. That carapace is kind of overhanging a little bit. Now, when it comes to gluing these together, there's two ways, I guess, two minds, really. You can just dab some glue straight onto the piece and stick it in there. Or if the glue that you're using is thin enough, you can just stick them together and then follow the line around, and it'll just kind of seep into that crack and create a nice bond. I kind of go back and forth between the two methods, if you will, depending on what I'm putting together. So this looks like it's going to be pretty good to go together. So I'm actually just going to paint some glue right on top here. I really love Plastic Magic. The applicator is really nice, and it's thin enough to do like a capillary effect like I was talking about, but also thick enough to do what I'm trying to do right here. So, see it's in there. Now I'm going to, something else that I'll do is just use the capillary effect just to kind of give it a small bond on the outside. And all I'm doing is taking a little bit of that glue and I'm putting it on the edges there, where they connect, and then because the glue is thin enough, it's just going to seep down into the recesses and close that gap if there was any. So, and then all you gotta do is let that dry. And because this is what I like to call sprue glue, it's actually a chemical bonding, so it is going to melt that together, so that'll be a really strong bond. So now I will move on to the head while that dries. So we have the head here. It's just these two pieces, and they just snug together like so. So it's pretty much going to be the same technique. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on this side here so I can squish that in there, and then I'll use the capillary effect to kind of smooth it out. So this one's fun just because of where you're holding it. Try not to get any glue on your fingers, because especially with this kind of glue, the residue will cause you to leave fingerprints behind, so you got to be a little careful there. Last thing you want is to go to paint a model and your fingerprint is smushed into that model's face. So we'll let those two pieces dry while I clean up the arms, and then we will put it all together. Alright, so the arms are ready to go, but I wanted to show one little thing real quick. Now, so I put some glue on the back of this, and as you can tell, that seam pretty much melted away really simply. It's not staying behind. However, if you roll to the front, you can tell that there's a little bit of a mismatch there, and even with putting some of that glue down, that mismatch is going to stay. So at this point, I like to go through and look at this, and if there's a mismatch there that I can clean up, I will just scrape along that mismatch with whatever tool. I usually use X-Acto knives, but sometimes I will bring in Citadel's sprue remover. I don't tend to use this a whole lot when it comes to the mold line remover. I don't use this a whole lot for mold lines. It's mainly just for stuff like this, just because it's got a little bit easier of grip and control. And when I go to scrape stuff off, and I can go both ways, and I don't really have to worry about cutting myself either. So I would just, kind of shape this up. Maybe I'll put a little bit more glue on there. Kind of use the capillary function of this and just go over it until I feel like that line is gone and won't come through when I go to paint it. So, all right. Let's go ahead and get this guy assembled. So, assembly is pretty much the same as we've been doing. So, for ball and socket joints, I like to put the glue on the ball portion, and then stick the socket on that. So it's ball and socket, so you can turn the head however you want here. And I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to get that capillary of the glue going just to fill these areas in. Oops, too much. Don't want to overload the model, otherwise you'll start to melt away some of the detail. So there is the face glued on, and then we're going to do the arms. And just like the head, the ball and socket joint kind of allows you to pose this. You kind of want to pay attention to where the arm is going to be, because when you go to base it, like right now, the arm is going to make this model not easily based. So I will bring this up to like there. And honestly, this is kind of where sub-assemblies would come into play, because it's going to be a little difficult to get around this arm in its current spot. So I would either move it to like there if I could, which might be able to get away with that. If I were to move it too much more up, it's going to block his face even more. So I'm going to put it right there and try to give us some room. Normally I would probably not put this arm on, and I'd paint it separately. So as I'm doing this, I'm starting to realize that I use both methods a lot more in conjunction with each other than I thought I did. I'm actually paying attention to what I'm doing here. It's not just me, going about the paces to get this bottle put together. So I'm learning stuff myself here. Alright, and then this bad boy. Alright, have it. Hormaguant. These guys come with slotted bases, so it's pretty simple. When you're done, you can just slot him into his base to get him so he's not laying down. As I say that, it takes forever to get him into his slot. Come on. Come on. There we go. Yay. All right, he's in his slot without breaking him. Ha! Okay, yeah, and there you go. So, you know, depending on where you had his hand, see, it's kind of there. So he was a little weighted weird, so he was kind of falling over, so I had to bring up his arm a bit just so he wouldn't go crashing into the ground, being a little, see how he's, yeah, we can fix that just by adjusting his pose a little. Yep. And then when we go to base him too, we can make the base a little heavier so he doesn't do anything crazy. But yeah, anyway, that is assembling a Hormaguant, going over the tools and whatnot that we needed to get the job done. I am going to continue. I've got 9 more of these to put together. So I am going to get that done, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.